want to welcome you to our virtual 2021 CSI Regional Conference. I'd like to introduce Miss Pam Jergenson, and she is from I'm sorry, Pam, which chapter are you? You're from Minneapolis?
Minneapolis, St. Paul, but also a member of Red River and Twin Ports. Hello.
Awesome. Well, I will turn it over to Pam to talk about air barriers today. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Don't go there. I can't tell you how many times I have said that when I get to a site. You got to be kidding me. You didn't just go there, did you? And you've probably heard that, right? You've heard that saying. Well, we're going to talk about don't go there with the air barrier, what those details are like in real life. I'm Pam Jergenson, a principal consultant at Braun Intertec, part of the Building and Structures Sciences Group. I've been a building envelope consultant for about 30 years. Been in construction for even longer than that. So I'm going to share just what I have for my summer of 2020, wearing a mask outside on construction sites. One little tidbit, though, that you might want to know. I have been an ABA field auditor, that's the Air Barrier Association of America, field auditor since 2013. I've seen a few square feet of air barrier. Let's just review the course description. I don't know that anyone saw this, but here you go. Solving any mishaps in construction, when I'm showing up at the site and looking at the air barrier, trying to solve these mishaps when I'm there, that's really kind of too late. We know that schedules are compressed, sequencing gets adjusted and moved around, change orders and rework, no one's got time for that, right? So today is all about looking at those slides from Pam's summer of 2020. We're going to get started with polling. You have to keep your finger ready. We don't want you to fall asleep this morning. Matter of fact, if you fall asleep, I promise you I'll return your money back, guaranteed. Yeah, I know. It was free coming today, wasn't it? All right, let's get started with that poll. Yep, let me know what your occupation is. I just want to know what part of the team you're on. See who's out there. So Kim, do you have any results?
So far, we have building owner 7.7%, architect engineer 61.5%.
Ooh, okay.
Installing contractor 0.
Oh.
Consultant 7.4 and other 22.2.
All right, other, I'm going to guess you might be some of those product manufacturers. That's okay. I will not be picking on you, nor the installing contractor. Matter of fact, the idea behind this presentation is to look at when these mishaps happen out there, and we don't want to go there, right? When can we forestall that? When can we look at our construction process and say, let's try to avoid this one? Now, more to the point on the agenda, a breezer look at the 6 characteristics of air barriers. But our focus today is those 5 top field installation issues that we want to avoid. Then, of course, I'll show you all those glorious site photos everybody likes to see, point out what some of those issues are, throw in a few little details of some of those projects, a few specifications and product manufacturers information. And we're going to have polls to discover what are some of the ways you can forego or forestall any of these issues that come up on the site. 6 key characteristics. Now, today's presentation really is going to focus on those last 2. That's the continuity and the structural support. If we don't get the continuity or structural support, do we have an air barrier? I don't know. Probably not, huh? Now, last fall, the Air Barrier Association of America did have a really cute presentation called the 3 Air Barrier Amigos. One of those speakers of the 3 was Ryan Dalglish, and he gave us that list of the 5 top field installation issues. And here it is. So you've got the improper sequencing and detailing at transitions. You've got poor substrate and even poor understanding by others. Does a roofer understand an air barrier? Does a welder understand an air barrier? More on that one later. How about damage or penetrations that show up? Damage happens, right? Fluid applied or sealant's not thick enough. That's number 4. And number 5, lack of transitions. Those are the 5 top field installation issues. Let's start with, yes, number 1, that improper sequencing and the detailing at those transitions. And we're talking window to wall and roof to wall. Starting out with my summer, I got a call a day before I took this photo. Yeah, we got to have you out here right away. You got to look at the air barrier. Okay, well, you're calling me like at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I don't think I can make it in time. I'm over in some other Timbuktu area. How about if I show up tomorrow morning? Sure. Now, get this. You see what I see, right? We got brick up, and I'm supposed to look at the air barrier. And the air barrier is where? Right? Don't go there. You called me too late, for starters. See where that orange circle is or that oval? Let me give you a close-up on another wall here. So that tan color is the air barrier. That groovy-looking steel stud spray foam is on that left. The wood blocking above for the roof edge detail, nothing there, right? What do we do? I'm going to go back to that slide just for a moment. What do we do when we got the brick all the way up to that wood blocking? And where's the air barrier on that wood blocking? Not cool. All right, guess what? Yeah, the contractor had to call back the masonry contractor to be sure to get all those transitions in. Did that cost a little bit of time? Yeah, were people maybe kind of upset about that idea? Someone had to be. I'm sure I was not the favorite one on the job site. But we do have a poll on this. How do you think we would prevent this? I mean, okay, other than the obvious, just think about what some options could be. So what could you do in the design phase? Could you actually detail it differently? Could you maybe talk about it more in the pre-installation? How about educating those trades? Would you want to do that, or reworking the detail? Yeah, let's rework the detail like we did here, and let's slow down the construction process. So think of it. There are so many ways that we could maybe forestall this. Could it be in design? Could it be in the pre-install? Could we have more education of the trades that are outside of air barriers? Kim, can you give us the answer?
Yes, we have 8 votes for talk about coordinating details and weekly progress meeting. That is by far the 61.5%.
Did anyone pick, let's rework the detail?
Yeah, no.
Okay, good. You're catching on. All right, let's look at what the drawings were for this project. Clearly, the architect has the orange dotted line showing exactly where that air barrier is supposed to be. Seems to me there was a matter of sequencing that was a problem. But now think of it from the contractor's perspective. Do you like that idea that you have to do this wood blocking and you have to have the air barrier guy come back after the wood blocking's on the CMU? Is there a sequencing problem there? Maybe. How about thinking about the detail in another way? This is putting it back in the design phase. Can we make that whole sequence easier, better, quicker, something? Let's try changing the detail. And this would be a possibility. So think about that. How about the level of specifications or details? Determining or putting something in that pre-installation meeting. Now, here's an example of 2 different specifications. The top one, pre-installation meeting. This is all that was in that spec for air barrier. Conduct one. Okay. How about what we have at the bottom where you've got a list of things? Let's see. I'm seeing something about special details and flashings. Maybe we could do that, right? So think of really any of these mishaps that happen can really have better possible forestalling or getting rid of or eliminating if we start tackling them a little bit earlier. Let's look at improper detailing. All right, on the left, that dark black, that's the fluid applied. The orange oval, that would be spray foam. And then the orange frame is the window. Peekaboo, we got holes, right? How about this? Improper detailing here. This is the window head. So we've got some mortar up at the soffit, kind of making some connections. Not probably appropriate for an air barrier transition at all. Here's some detailing. And again, peekaboo, we've got some holes right here. How could we maybe forestall this? Let's take a look at those specifications and even the product master spec. How do those compare? You take a look at wall openings, letter C, it says 3 inches, but then you go to number 4, a little elsewhere in that specification, and it says overlap by 2 inches. So then the contractor's like, okay, am I doing 2? Or do I split the difference? Do I do 2.5? Yeah, you'll get it right 50% of the time, I suppose. But down below would be what the manufacturer says, 2 inches. Well, if the manufacturer says 2 inches and then the spec says 3 or 2, then what do you pick? Good question. Improper detailing. All right, I'm looking up at a low roof and a higher roof, and that's the wood blocking. Does anybody see some really nice travel pathways for air to come through? This is what happens when we leave the roofer to do that detailing. Does the roofer understand air barriers? Maybe not, right? How about this? This is really a good one. An existing building gets stripped of the eaves insulation system. All right, we're going to put on a new metal wall panel. What we do is we're going to replace that metal flashing on top, that cap flashing. Don't worry. Yeah, there's overspray. That through wall scupper, though, this is what the air barrier installer says. Oh, yeah, don't worry about it. When we get farther along in the project, we'll take care of that. Yeah, we'll do that. When I came back a few weeks, days later, and we're about to put the metal panel wall on because you can see all that insulation and all the batten. If we look a close up look, we've got that insulation right tight to that wood blocking. We don't have a transition of the air barrier up and over. Guess what they had to do? You got it. A little rework. Why not? That's always fun in the summertime. Let's go on to number 2. How about that poor substrate? Have you ever seen one of them? Poor understanding by others? Yeah, seen that a few times. This is an example where we're putting an addition on the left onto an existing building on the right. You know what I really like? That transition membrane on the inside corner. It's shingled properly, looks great, but wait. You see that orange oval? Yeah, we've got that sealant kind of gooed into that concave joint, but if that joint is cracked all the way across and behind there, do we have the air sealed off? Good question. Here's an example of an existing building, and you're going to have to get ready for a poll here pretty quick because on this existing building, this is really not good. So the existing building, again, tear off all of the finish. We're going to put something new on. But in the meantime, the air barrier installer comes by and he starts spraying after they tore everything off. Now, you're not supposed to have voids. You're supposed to have a smooth substrate. How are we going to prevent this one? Think of it. Do we want to have maybe allowances for filling void work? And maybe that's something between the general and the air barrier installer. Oh, let's see here. Require that the installer provide a unit price or submit the air barrier installed price and a unit price for filling. How about strong arm? Okay. Strong arm that air barrier installer to just take care of it. In clean construction language, that means suck it up, buttercup. You're doing it. You don't get no extra money. All right, that's not necessarily fair. Believe it or not, I'm sticking up for the installer on this one. And are we getting close on some poll results? I got to see what you guys are thinking out there.
There we go. It's coming up between include the allowance for filling voids and require air barrier installers to provide a unit price for filling voids are the two highest answers.
There you go. There you go. And I like those ideas. But again, I'm trying to get you to think bigger and broader how all of these avenues are a possibility. All right, let's go to the new construction. We just built this brand new. This is a brand new CMU wall. Clearly, the CMU installer doesn't understand what the air barrier needs because, yeah, we've got some scores in the CMU. We don't know if that air barrier is in there, right? What do you do in new construction? How are you going to prevent this in new construction? We've got another poll here. In new construction, we've got some choices. In new construction, let's see, we could specify something, right? We could talk about it in the we could, the installer could just refuse to install it. How does that sound? That usually doesn't go over very well, though.
It looks like on the poll, we're split between specifying CMU construction with flat tooled mortar joints without voids and extrusions, about 50% of the votes, and then discuss masonry substrate requirements in pre-installation meeting with about 40% of the votes.
There you go. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, that idea about let's back charge the mason contractor. Good luck. I don't know. Will he pay it? Not sure.
Pam, just wanted to give you a comment from the chat. Alan has said, regarding filling voids, this should be the responsibility of the installer to give a complete installation and not be paid for correcting their errors.
That's a real interesting situation. You don't know what you're up against. However, the substrate requirements by an air barrier manufacturer almost unequivocally across the board says the substrate must be free of voids before the installer installs it. Now, the installer takes that to mean the substrate has to be ready for me to install my product. That's always that question. Do we just go ahead and install anyways and just go with it? Or do we assume that liability? But that substrate is supposed to be prepared that way without voids before the installer gets there. So that's a tough one. I know what you're saying. Let's move on to number 3. Damage or penetrations through air barriers. Like I said, damage happens. Construction's imperfect. We know that, right? Somebody walks by, sets their ladder up. Oh, I saw that one time. The roofer had to get up to the roof edge. The wall had been sprayed probably just a few hours before. The roofer brings his ladder, and you know the ladders never look really that great. They're all rough and tough looking, and they don't have any of those nice little plastic knobbies on the end. Well, he just slams it up against the wall because he's got to get up there to that wood blocking. He's got to fix something from the underside. Just slams the ladder up there, and my heart is just crumbling here. You just probably put a hole in the air barrier, right? Okay, well, let's see. What else have I seen? Here's an example. What is that? I know. Let me get a close-up. Yeah, you know what? My guess was someone put a piece of plywood against the wall probably shortly after it was sprayed. Next morning, you just tear it off and walk away. There you go. Damage happens. How about this? That was all wrapped in nicely looking neat work when I saw it before the window went in. And do you see what I see? The windows are in now. Yeah, that's maybe a little bit of the installer doesn't understand the fragility of that sheet membrane. All right. Let's go to this one. Here's an idea where the window installer used these really long screws. More is better, right? Okay, kind of like what Martha was saying earlier, less is more sometimes. However, my question when I came upon this was, does the window installer really need that length of fastener? Is there a reason for that length? No, it was the more is better idea. So, of course, the window installer had to come back, clip them off, and we had to have someone dab it up with sealant. It's like that's just one more area that could be prone to problems. And damage. Hey, did I say something about a welder earlier? I'm looking up. I'm like, oh, sparks, right? Huh. You don't suppose something happened after he welded on that angle. Bingo. Yeah. So if the welder is welding, and the air barrier's up, do you suppose the welder understands what the sparks are doing to the air barrier? Clearly not, because it wasn't protected. Pull time. How do we prevent this? A few choices. How about this? How about the structural drawings? Maybe the structural drawings should say something about better be careful when you're welding. And the pre-installation meeting. Again, can we talk about this? How about the scheduling, the sequencing? Who goes first? And last but not least, expect the welder to fix the damage. Okay. Does the welder even know that that's damage? How are we looking on those answers, Kim?
This one, it's kind of jumping around a lot, which is kind of interesting. We were higher on include air barrier repair methods, and now they're pretty even across that one. Discuss welding activities and air barrier installation in the same progress meeting, and schedule welding before the air barrier installation.
There you go. It's kind of a toss-up, right? Or you could maybe pick two of the three. Try to really nip it in the bud. Do what you can. How about something like this? Those penetrations that, whoa, they just show up. Now, one day I was looking at this installation, I'm like, yeah, nice installation. Next day, I'm like, what? We got Romex here. How about this one? Oh, yep, we got to have an outlet out here. Oh, and you want water? Let's just put one right in there, and we'll just leave it hanging. And we do have another poll. What are we going to do about this? How are we going to prevent that? One of my other presentations, I'll talk about the pre-installation meeting for air barriers. And I say, and you want the roofer there, and you want the plumber there, and you want the electrician there. And people would look and like, nah, you're not going to have everyone there. Okay, and if you don't, how about this photo? Isn't this what you get? So how are you going to prevent this damage? How do you prevent the penetrations? How about conducting a coordination meeting? Install air barrier detailing by requiring the offending subcontractor or general contractor to use attic stock. Love that term, attic stock. Hopefully it's not that old, because I know it's in some attics, right? Are you going to want to have those people install that repair material? Are they qualified? Do they understand that you have to have repairs done 6 inches beyond the area of damage, plus you have to seal it off? That whole process, do they understand that?
It looks like the majority, 55% or so, say conduct a coordination meeting with your MEPs and the air barrier subcontractors, and another 20% said require them to complete before the air barrier.
Yes, which is a nice thought. And I agree. I kind of, I like either one of those choices, actually. But you know what happens? Sometimes all of a sudden, oh, wait, it's not on the plan, but we need an outlet here, or we need a hose bib here. It's not on the plan. We've got to add it in now. Then all of a sudden it's an add-in. And I think that's what I see sometimes. It's the add-in, But other times I have seen it where the general has said, nope, okay, I want all the penetrations through the roof right now. And then we're going to have the roof, and then we're going to have the air barrier installed in that sequence. And I'm like, oh man, I love it. This is how it should be. All right, let's move on. We have got number 4. Here it is. Fluid applied and sealant's not thick enough. Okay. What does that say? Glass? Dense glass, I think is what it says. That's not thick enough, is it? No. And if you can see a little shadow like this, you got to look at it the right angle, right? You can see a little shadow like this, maybe it's not thick enough. How about sealant? Sealant's not thick enough here. If you can see that cut edge, not cool. Here we go, not thick enough. Okay, I was giving the contractor, or excuse me, the installer, a thumbs up on the width. You got the 2 inches that's needed to make that transition. But thumbs down, not thick enough, sorry. Actually, there are some air barrier manufacturers that do specify a certain thickness that sealant needs to be. Okay, that sealant looks like something I might have done. Yeah. Well, here we go. Let's take a look at those specifications. So what can happen? What can happen? Specifications of products versus the execution. This is where things can get a little dicey. Now, in this case, the 35 mils in the product portion, 2.2, right? In the product, that works. Insulation, 3.2, that works, 35 mils. Now, the product they were installing required less than 35 mils, and that was the approved air barrier product. Do we want to put those mils in the spec, but allow a substitute or allow one of those listed to be less than that? It's a tough spot to be in. How much do you want to be looking at your products and your execution and the actual product listing in your spec? That takes some time. We already got enough on our plate trying to get these specs out, right? Any spec writers out there, right? How about this? Let's look at a specification versus product data. So in this case, the specification, letter C, says 30 mils. All right. And that's a dry film. Okay. Then down below, this is what the product data says, 40 mils dry. Again, what am I going to do? Do I do 35? Or the spec says 30, but the product data says 40. But if I can get by with what the spec says, why don't I do that? Because it probably won't work properly. The air barrier is required by the manufacturer to be 40 mils dry. So we need to be really careful about what we're doing on the thickness. We're already confused enough out there at the site. We don't need any more. So always watch and look for that coordination. All right, let's look at lack of transitions. This is almost hysterical. All right, and I promise you even the last one's better yet. Okay, spray foam. That's like our new duct tape, isn't it? Yeah. You don't know what to do. How do you fill it in? Let's get some spray foam. Just run to Menards, get the can, all over. Yeah, that's what they did. And peekaboo, we've got holes, right? Then the transition up to the wood blocking, nothing really. Let's take a look at those details for this particular project. Now, on the left is the wall section. On the right is that particular area with that scupper. Do you see those 2 orange arrows in the upper right side? See wall section for typical notes. And then you look at those 2 arrows over on that left wall section. There ain't no notes. Oops. Then you look at that orange circle there. It says sealant around scupper. Well, okay, that's on the outside where the brick or whatever that finish is, but is that all we got? Do we do anything back by the wall area? I don't know. That's why I got that blue question mark. It's like, I'm not sure what to think about here. I'm not sure what's happening. Here we go. How about this? Yes, this is a through wall scupper. And yes, we see some bad insulation coming through. And I love that little kiddie pond, right? I talked to the general on this. He said, "Oh, well, don't worry. We'll have the roofer do all the transitions." I'm like, I don't think that's a good idea. You really need to have a good surface around there, a substrate that's got some structure to it. Bad insulation doesn't really have structure, right? Okay, let's see what the roofer decided to do. I know, right? Let's see. This is all the leftovers from I don't know when. Matter of fact, yeah, these are the Firestone leftovers with, I'm not sure if that's a Firestone membrane even. Who knows? Yeah, here's our poll. This is our poll time. Pick one. What do you think? How are we going to prevent this one? Might want to do some detailing. That's in the design phase. How about a mock-up? That would be good. Or just reviewing some of these details in the field with the air barrier installer before they just go willy-nilly crazy because they're in a hurry because they got another job down the street or another county over, whatever. So, how about that last one? Ask the last subcontractor that touches it that they have to deal with it. They might not be the air barrier installer, but and that's like what we did here. We asked the roofer to take care of it. Any poll results?
The poll's about, 60-40, 50-50. It's been back and forth between the second and third one. Include transition details in the mock-up or require air barrier shop drawing submittals for the transition details.
Very good. Now, if you require those shop drawings, you might want to take a close look at them. I've seen some of those shop drawings. Sometimes they're just, the manufacturer's details just put together and nothing real specific on them, just the generic ones. Now, the manufacturers give us those to give us some guidance. They're not giving us the answers, right? Okay. So if they're giving us guidance, this is like, you should probably think about doing it this way. Okay. We're not going to be using those for shop drawings. And matter of fact, I would reject those quite honestly, because that's just not enough. They need to be very specific to the project. But I like your thinking. Yes. So yeah, let's not ask that last subcontractor that touches it. That's just a no-go for me. Let's look a little bit more at lack of transitions. Oh, look at this. Here we go. This is a project where last summer, again with my mask on, I'm looking like, okay, well, this is nice. We've got a very clear, defined addition, existing building, a very nice 1/2-inch hole. This 1/2-inch, it went all the way up to the top. That's nice. It was well done, but it's a hole for an air barrier. The transition from existing to new to existing is important. I understand. Some people always argue this. Oh, but that existing building, that doesn't have no air barrier. I'm like, right, but we got to try to prevent as much as we can. That's the point. Okay. In this case, we're offering free air conditioning, right? Not good for the HVAC or the owner that pays the bill, right? Let me show you what was on the drawings for this project. New, existing. There's no detail balloon, nothing. Okay, if you don't detail it, you don't get anything. Right? Okay. How about this one? How about this transition? Oh, but I put the sealant in. Again, peekaboo. We've got holes. And then I look at the drawings on this. There's nothing there, just maybe a dotted line at best. Sometimes a dotted line stops right above that concrete. And I'm left wondering, wait a minute, doesn't the air barrier go all the way down? Okay. This is interesting. All right. These concrete planks that we see the ends of, That's actually the floor to an attic. It's one of those steep gable roof buildings that I'm looking at. The CMU below it, of course, the wall below, it's a 2-story. But where's the transition? I'm not seeing it. It's just in the air, right? This is the detail. Grout full, those ends of the precast. Got it. Is that all we're doing? Oh, I hope not. Okay, so guess what? Here's the specifications. Specifications got, letter A, letter D, and letter E. All of those make sense. But you know where it says with membrane air barrier manufacturers written instructions? You know what that paragraph is at the bottom? That's the manufacturer's written instructions. They want it to be relatively smooth. That seems maybe subjective in this case. Maybe not. All right.
And we might get into this a little bit more. There's been some back and forth about, and here I'll ask the question here. Do any architects out there have an absolute acceptable minimum thickness that they feel comfortable with for fluid applied? Because even when a manufacturer has successfully tested their very thin product, I'm reluctant to specify something with such a fine margin of error. So, and that was Robert Johnson Miller. And Sheldon said, I agree, Robert. It's fine to have a perfectly applied 10 mil membrane in a lab test, but in the field, how do you ensure that the installer gets that oh so thin layer everywhere at the very least? Should they apply it in 2 passes? But that's not going to happen. So there's been some discussion on how to know, how to feel safe with the amount that the manufacturer recommends.
It just brings up a whole host of things, and I'm going to try to break it down in a few thoughts I have here. First of all, if you are working with an air permeable air barrier, you really need to adhere to those thicknesses. If the air barrier goes on too thick in the air, or the vapor permeable, on the vapor permeable, if it gets on too thick, it becomes impermeable. All right. So that's one thing to think about, first of all. Second of all, what you can do as a specifier or an architect or someone on the design team, you could just automatically say, we're not going to allow anything less than like 35 mils, one of those examples. We're not going to allow a substitution less than that. We're not going to allow it in our spec, period. And that's fine. Totally up to the design professional. Now, if you do accept that 10 mil thickness like Sheldon talks about, maybe you want to have someone there with a wet mill gauge all day long, every day of installation, watching. I don't know. You could do those periodic wet mill gauges, but I don't know. I think you're kind of in a dicey area. What level of comfort do you have, or what is the risk that you want to take? That, to me, is what that question ends up being. So I'm just throwing a few ideas out there. Not sure if I answered your question or just maybe fostered a little more discussion, but keep going with the chat. That was a good one. All right, here is the Coup de Grace. If anybody remembers Christmas Story, this is not the triple dog dare you. This is the quadruple dog dare you. Yes, we've got 4 issues, and you're not going to believe it. This is all in one little wall. One little wall that's maybe 15 to 20 feet long. It has nearly all of the above, and I'm not kidding you. Could it get any worse? I don't know. Could it? Maybe. Let's look at it. Here's number 2, pour substrate. Maybe fill those knots. Maybe don't use that piece of plywood. I don't know. Got a few ideas. How about this damage? Ironically, this damage was from the air barrier installer going around the corner with the hose, with the fluid applied, and then spraying that other side, but got some damage. I don't think the mill thickness is there, at least not where we have all those hose marks. And the ever popular, here comes the hose bib, right in the middle of it all. And let's throw in a few more. These are all in that little 15 to 20 foot area. Penetrations not dealt with. How about not thick enough? Well, if you can see the wood grain, I would wonder. And the ever popular lack of transitions. Yes, let's get a close up of that. My goodness, very big. Looks like small animals could get through there. And I know that when I peeked in there, I could see the guys working inside. This is your last poll question. How in the earth are we going to prevent this whole mess? Aside from maybe your air barrier installer is not who you want. So, what are we going to do? This poll, well, there's something about the specifications in there. How about the submittal and the mock-up? How about pre-installation meeting? How about allowances? What do you think? Pick one. While you're just pondering that, I'll let you know that this took a little bit of time for us to sort this one out and get it fixed. Quite honestly, I don't know if it got totally fixed because I didn't get to go back, but it was worth a nice little meeting of minds at the site. And we all have time for that again, right? Do we have any results showing up, Kim?
Yes, the majority is choosing the all of the above and more, whereas there's about 20% of us that, I'm saying that because I picked it, conduct air barrier in at the least pre-installation meetings to discuss details and repairs with other subcontractors. Yeah. And shop drawings has also kind of crept up to about 20%.
There you go. There you go. You know, with so much wrong on this one, I'm more than happy with letter E or, you know, the last one, all of the above. But if you can nip this kind of stuff in the any other way, whether it be in the design, whether it be in the pre-install, whatever, that would be great. Now, I have to show you the drawing for this one. Here's the drawing. Again, existing, new. No detail bubble, nothing. I don't see where a hose bib is. I don't see where that lamb's tongue or cow's tongue, whatever that is, tongue. I do see the scupper, but we don't have any help here. There isn't anything. And if we as a design group don't say, look, we're looking for this much, then we, you know, I'm kind of on both sides here. We in the construction are like, well, you get what you get then. If you don't say anything, maybe you don't get anything. That's really a poor attitude. Agreed. I don't like it either. And that's not how I would necessarily operate. But we know that idea exists out there. Well, we have made our very quick tour through all of these slides. We've gone through those top 5 field installation issues that the Air Barrier Association of America says these are the primary issues we have. Now, us as a design and or construction community, we need to figure out how can we stop this stuff from going down, because I just saw this last summer and I've been doing this since 2013 or even earlier. So it seems to me we're still not getting it somewhere along the line. And we need to look at what can we do with our specifications, tighten those up, add more information if need be. Why not? Even about the pre-installation meeting, you know, instead of the one sentence, like have one, let's add a little more layers to it. Or how about in the drawings? If we don't put a detail bubble there, let's make a note or something, or require that they come up with a detail. Yeah, that's a design build situation I'm not sure if you want to be in. And who wants that liability, right? That's another question. How about in the pre-installation meeting or the progress meetings? How educating all of us on what air barriers are.
So I've got a question from Martha out there. Sorry to interrupt you, Pam. I think it's a good question. From my experience, there are not a lot of contractors that specialize in air barriers. If you have to pick, besides specialists, which trade do you prefer as the installer?
What's really interesting, it depends on what region I know that when I'm in Wisconsin, the southwest area there, for instance, Market and Johnson, I believe, they have the masonry people pretty well versed in air barriers because they also, at least a few years ago, they used to install the air barrier as well. So they had this really good education. And in that case, the masonry contractor slash air barrier installer was really not a bad choice at all. In our region here in the Twin Cities, and I can't speak for all of NCR, but in our region here, it's been a mixed bag. Up until more recently, it's now become more of the waterproofers. And I think that's mainly because the below grade waterproofing people work with fluid applied, they work with sheet goods. They're akin to that, they know it, and can work relatively easy with that. However, I still say that there is a little more technical expertise with air barriers that's above grade versus what's below grade, only from the standpoint that we have all these transitions and all these penetrations and stuff. Not to say that below grade you don't get some of those ganged up penetrations that are just a nightmare. So I would say if you have to pick and choose, that's what you get. But you know what? Rarely do we get to pick and choose unless it is one of those negotiated contract type scenarios. You know, on those public bid, you get what you get and you don't have a fit. So I think that answers your question, or at least I hope it does. But I think the waterproofers, below grade waterproofers, have at least a pretty good handle on those ideas of fluid applied and sheet goods. Any other questions that you have, Kim?
Yes, I have a couple. Kermit asks, has your company been hired for full-time observations for air barrier installations? There's a cost, but cheaper than the alternatives.
I know that I have done those, one or two a long time ago. Otherwise, no. It just doesn't happen. Now, let me kind of give you a little bit of background. Now, as an Air Barrier Association field auditor, the premise of the field auditor is just to check up on to be sure that they are following all the protocol that the Air Barrier Association of America puts out there. They have a very stringent protocol of daily field reports, daily testing, and so on and so forth. And that's what that field auditor does. So in other words, in that scenario, the visits are very limited, very limited. Now, on the other hand, we are doing something directly for, let's say, a building owner, or we're working, well, contractor, kind of depends. If we are working with them, they'll say, well, just give me a handful of visits. That's all we really need. And I don't know if I would advise that. It depends too on the comfort level of the air barrier installer that's on the project as well. Now, on the other hand, I was involved in the 100-bed facility for the Minnesota a few years ago. They, interestingly enough, had the Air Barrier Association field auditing along with additional site visits, where I was out there roughly once a week, depending on what was happening, maybe twice a week. So that's about the extent of what I'm seeing come across. No, I just haven't seen full time. It might not be a bad idea if it is, let's say, even a hospital setting where that's really critical to have a very good air barrier for infection control and other reasons. It might not be a bad idea to have a daily site visit. Now, full-time meaning sun up to sundown maybe is extreme, but how about once a day? Think about that as an idea. But good question.
Lynn just pointed out, is there an air barrier association? Perhaps some education, certification training would be in order, or also require inspections prior to cover up.
Yes. All right. So Lynn, loaded question, lots of answers for you. Certainly in the specifications, it can say air barrier must be fully inspected before it's covered up. Speaking about covered up, that sentence gets to be covered up by a lot of the other pages of the spec. I'm afraid I have seen that, but I've also seen it where I get called like that very first slide and the brick's up and I'm like, that ship sailed. I don't know what else to do. If me being the inspector, there isn't much I can do. It would be up to more of the design professional or the general to make sure that gets enforced and that someone is out there. So I like that idea, although I've seen it fail miserably, I think is the terminology that we would use. So yes, another answer to your question, Air Barrier Association of America. I pronounce it ABA. Some people want to say ABBA because they're going back to the with the hair and the songs, Mamma Mia, all that. But ABA, Air Barrier Association of America, yes, they have all sorts of training. In fact, on those projects that I do the ABA field auditing for, that requires an ABA certified installer. And that doesn't mean like the company gets this nice little wall plaque because they paid some money. Okay, but they did pay some money because what they do is they actually certify the individual installers. And when I'm out there, I'm looking for each one of those individual installers' card saying that I can do this, signed by ABA. Okay, so they have an installer training program. They have the field auditor program, that be me. All right. There's also a certified air barrier specialist program. What it is it's not really a program. It's a certification. I know CSI has those too, right? Okay. This certification means that you know air barriers in and out. Not a bad idea for any of you in the design field or those that are watching construction, watching air barriers to do that. If you don't want to become the field auditor, that's fine. But having a certified air barrier specialist called CABS is one way to do that. So there is education out there. Matter of fact, the Air Barrier Association of America, making a plug for them, sorry, does have weekly webinars, which I have done 2 within the last 6-7 months, this one being one of them. So they definitely have education there. It's available. It's free. Go online, look at their website. I hope I answered all your questions, Lynn.
Timothy Gilbert said a third-party inspection should happen following installation of air barrier to meet manufacturer's requirement.
I would agree with you on that. I don't know if that always happens. Again, that hustle and bustle of the summer and construction and deadlines and sequencing. I agree with you. I would love to see that, but I don't know that that happens all the time. Good point, though. Good point.
Also, Julia Manglitz has a good point. She said, looking at all of this, all I can think is, what happens in 15 years when someone punches another hole in the wall as part of an alteration? Buildings have a life beyond construction. And as an owner's rep, I know that this can happen even before construction is done. So that's another problem. The air barrier is put in, but it can be altered very soon after construction is done.
Very good question, Julia. Yes. And hi, by the way, I haven't seen you for a while. Yes, unfortunately, that's what happens. We do change our buildings. Somehow buildings become a little more malleable, I think, in one sense, in that we try to, let's put in another window. So-and-so wants a window, or all of a sudden we're putting addition or whatever. I think what we have to do then in that case is we have to be sure that if we're putting in new holes or whatever we're doing to that building, we have to open it up large enough so we can tie into that. Now, I have been involved in some projects like that. It does take a little bit more work from the design side to do that, because from the design side, we have to understand what is the air barrier that's on there, because we don't want to mix incompatible materials. Actually, what you want to do is you want to know what manufacturer and what material, and probably use that same material and not allow any substitutes, because you're tying into an air barrier that is already in existence. So it does come with a lot of questions, very good questions, but that's maybe just a snippet or a snapshot of what we want to look at when we're already adding on to something that has an air barrier or making changes. Good point, Julia. Anything else?
Just got one from Clark Simpson. Is there any way to warranty the air barrier?
Well, the warranty comes from the manufacturer. This is always that question, though, about warranties. Do we want to really rely on a warranty to be it? We really just want a good installation, correct detailing, all of that good stuff. The warranty really doesn't come from me, an inspector. It doesn't come from the general contractor, but it comes from the manufacturer. And I think in terms of the manufacturer's warranty, we know that generally it's just for the material. I don't know that installers are going to warranty their work other than the typical, 10-month warranty walkover kind of a thing. But quite honestly, what do you see after 10 months on a walkover when it comes to air barrier? Yeah, zip. So a warranty. You know what? That's always the bane of our discussions is warranties and all of those lovely guarantees. Yeah, remember I guaranteed you weren't going to sleep, right? Your money back. Anything else, Kim?
I'll just tell you Sheldon's comment because I think this is perfect to end on. Odd, isn't
All
it,
right.
that the contractor agrees to construct a building according to the contract documents, but we have to hire someone else to monitor the contractor's work. Shouldn't we also hire someone to monitor the companies monitoring the contractor's work?
Now, Sheldon, are you talking about someone needs to be monitoring me? I don't know what you're after, mister.
I think
And
he's
who
talking
invited
about
you?
the frustration that we all have is that,
Oh,
if everybody
yeah.
would just do their work to begin with, we wouldn't have these third party inspections,
Yes.
just continue. But yeah.
Sure.
And Lynn said about the same thing. In a perfect world, the installer would do a good job. So very
Right.
good. I think that's just part of the frustration when it comes to air barriers, but very good talk back and
You
forth
bet.
on the chat today.
Love it. I am glad to hear that the chat was working and the polls worked all right. I hope you all stayed awake. Like I said, money back guarantee. There's my contact information. Plus, don't forget, visit our booth. You're going to have a few minutes. I ran about 5 over. Sorry. I think that should do it. Are we ready to sign out?